Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Another packed one today, starting with Chris Cooley. Chris and I go over the offense, the defense, and everything you want to know about what's going on the field. And then it's Redskins tight end Vernon Davis talking about the emotions of playing last week, a day after learning about his grandfather's death. And then it's me answering your mailbag questions. But first, my interview with Chris Cooley. All right, now I have the master of the film and the guy who's as smart as anybody, Chris Cooley, joining me on the podcast here. You don't have to snicker at that because it's true. But before we kind of look back at all at the Eagles game, I really kind of want to use that to look ahead to the Dallas game because that's what matters here. And I want to start with, I think the defense was supposed to be the bedrock here, the foundation of this team, and they were anything but that in the second half. So moving forward, what are a couple of things that you saw from that game that you say you've got to clean this up if you want to have a chance against this passing attack?
Well, let's move forward, I guess, before we move back. But I think that they have to simplify what they're doing a little bit on defense. I think they had a lot of miscues and misunderstandings and some blown coverages and some looks even in coverage where even if you're playing coverage the right way, you're still giving up big gaps and big spaces. So understanding where you are in coverage. You and I were just sitting and talking about a 3rd and 9 from the Eagles game, and I think that's a really good example. Because they're playing a version of an inverted cover 2 type of look. And so instead of normal cover 2, you would have your safeties as deep halves, and your corners would be the flat players. Well, they brought Monte down in the flat, and then Quentin Dunbar's playing the deep half on that side. And that's not a common place for that safety to play a lot of times. And so
I haven't seen Monte do that
Wentz
much
steps
at all.
out and kind of looks at the flat, and Monte's running up to play the flat player. It's a 3rd and 9. We want you to throw. We want him to throw that flat because you got to believe that your defense can rally and tackle and try to get them in a 4th and 3, 4th and 4 situation. Now, maybe Peterson goes for it in that world. Maybe you're thinking about that, but Dunbar's way too soft and too concerned as the 2 corner on that side. Or the deep half player, and Monte's too far up, and that's a big gap.
It is.
And that's not a blown coverage. That's just a poorly played coverage.
Right.
And so I think there was a lot of varieties of poorly played coverages and instances on some of the bigger plays, and then some blown coverages.
And there was that inverted, I believe it looked like an inverted Tampa 2 on the first touchdown to Deshaun. Was that what that?
Yeah, that was another version of inverted 2 where Norman's going to play the deep half. And a lot of times, and teams are doing this across the league and a lot in college football, and they'll roll the safeties down, and the safety will a lot of times play like the Tampa linebacker, or that middle of the field player. And in that instance, they roll both the safeties down hard, and they let Sean Dion Hamilton run to the deep middle. And he jumped a dig route in the middle, and you're thinking, Sean, we just have 2 safeties down in front of you to play that dig route. Like, you got to be back. So you got guys playing all over the field, which is hard for quarterbacks to read. So I understand the disguise. I understand the idea of deception. But every quarterback reads wide open receiver. And so that's the thing, is if you play it really well, you can create turnovers, you can get picks, you can get plays on the ball. If you play it poorly, it's just an open receiver. So especially if the quarterback doesn't necessarily know, you go, wow, my guy flashed, here we go. And so that's something that they'll have to clean up on the back end. And if they don't, I think that they have corners to play a straight 3 type of look at times.
That's what I thought they were going to do more of because they do seem to have that kind of style where they can, right? I mean, that's with Josh and Quentin. That should be what they are good at, correct?
Yeah, well, Josh is the 3 corner that plays with vision of the quarterback. And I think that you got to believe that Quentin, even if you don't trust totally vision or something, that you play a 3 lock where you're locking Dunbar on that side. There's certain things that you could do with him in those instances, but they were incredibly versatile with their coverage calls and with the diversity of coverage in the back end. And I think moving forward, it'll be a big emphasis to stop the run game and focus on how you stop the run game. And I think if you really want to do it in that way, you just have to simplify some of the back end with coverage, which would also benefit them from what
Sure. And I would assume that they want to, at least if you simplify it now, you still want to start adding to it as guys get comfortable with these calls. Would you agree with that, or would you just say simplify it going forward, or just like peel away a little bit and build on that instead of throwing it all right?
Well, I think there's always that week one thing as well, where you've had so much time as a coaching staff and a lot of time with your players to get ready to do a lot of fun things. It was almost like Jay's offense last year, where you saw like all the diversity and all the different things, and I mean, and none of it tied. You know, like none of it really tied and pulled together last year. It seemed like there were a lot of ideas. And so when I looked at the defense, I felt like I looked at a defense that had a lot of fun ideas, but it didn't necessarily have a connective plan in terms of exactly what you were doing. And it's also a defense, if you watch them last week, that had checks to everything.
Yeah.
They were checking all over the field. Like you look at the blown coverage where I think Moreland gave up a deep ball, never 100% short. I don't know exactly how they were going to play that. I mean, you could say that they're going to do something differently, but Jimmy Moreland's got his hands up at his sides, looking around before the play multiple times, going, hey, and so you're thinking, are those coverage checks that they're missing? And defenses across the league do this to formations. They say it's just like offense. We've got to check with me. We've got 2 plays called in the huddle. If they give us a certain formation or look, we're going to go 1. If they give us the other formation or look, we're going to go to number 2. And so they have all these calls and checks.
And the funny thing is, on that play, like I understand, like sometimes I know teams use the motion, the jet sweep, and all that to basically go from a 3-by-1 to a 2-by-2, and it forces you to check. On that play, there was none of that. That's what was a little bit confusing to me, is that there was no motion, I believe, on that play.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm thinking with our defense is essentially like an offensive check with me, where you see the quarterback go to the line and say kill, or can, or whatever they say. It's just based on the front. And so defensively, your checks aren't always. Your checks might be based on 3-by-1 or 2-by-2, but they give you 3-by-1, and your initial call would have been 2-by-2. So you check it. It was a lot. It seemed like they were doing a lot, and it seemed like they weren't doing a lot really, really well. I think they have good players. I think they have good talent. I think that you moving forward, you have to simplify something. And the other thing moving forward is they have to get after the passer. I don't know if it would have mattered on a couple of those plays, but they have to be able to get after the quarterback. Yeah, and there were a couple of times, I think, on one of the touchdowns where Ryan was like almost right there, but you're not getting home. And then a couple of times they lost the lane discipline too, to let him get outside the pocket and hurt them. But yeah, no, there was very little pass rush. And I thought, I wondered if they would try to stunt more. I wondered if they would send more the inside guys. And they sent Holcomb a couple times, and he almost got there one time, or at least pushed him back. So I was surprised. But looking at Dallas too, with they're coming off a really, really good first game with the ball, and with passing the ball, and Dak Prescott looked really good. The receivers are breaking. I also thought the Giants' coverage sucked, to be honest. But you look at it was terrible. There were multiple times how are you not throwing there were I don't know, it almost looked like an RPO, but I can't remember which play it was, but Cooper's on the inside, and the D-back is 8 yards off, and it's like a 3rd and 2nd short or something like that. And it's he's going right over the middle because there's no linebackers dropping. It was ridiculously easy at times for them. But what does Cooper do? What has stood out to you about Amari Cooper? Amari Cooper can beat man-to-man coverage, and Amari Cooper can also take the top of the defense. And you add that he's very good after the catch. And so he's a very versatile player that you have to pay attention to at all times. I don't know just yet if Amari Cooper fully dictates coverage, if he has that ultimate speed to fully dictate coverage. But he's got enough that you are going to pay attention to him at all times. And so that's where you see Michael Gallup getting softer, easy coverage on the other side, or some of their players getting some easy looks. The other thing with Dallas, their run game is so imposing that you have to play 8-man boxes, or you have to play 7-man boxes to 11 personnel. Right. It's really, really hard to play them without having an extra player in the box.
And I think the Giants were doing that, obviously, because that's where you got to stop Zeke first. And these guys are going to try and stop Zeke first and foremost, too. The other thing I like about Cooper, too, is that it feels like he has a good sense of the coverage and where the guys, there were a couple of times he had one deep comeback where it almost looks like now he's turned to he's going to try and get you deep. The corner almost looks like he starts to bail, loses sight of him, and he immediately comes back.
Yeah, he's really good with patience in his routes.
Yeah.
That's the one thing
off
I
the
would say
line
with Amari
especially.
Cooper is he has a ton of patience in his routes, and he's a disciplined route runner. He gets where where you want him to be, where you expect him to be, and that's the kind of player that he is. He runs routes with a lot of discipline.
I enjoyed watching him last year just for that reason. There was a play against the Giants off the line, very patient, and I think he beats the guy deep. But it starts with the patience at the line. With the pass rush, what would you like to see more of going forward besides success? Is there some way that you can say these guys just have to win one-on-one, or do you say that there's something more they can do to generate more?
You'd love to see Kerrigan and Montez Sweat get more individual pressure. And when they sub it out, you'd love to see Casanova and Ryan Anderson. He's got to be better when he's in the ball game as well. So you'd love to see more impactful rushes from those guys. I don't think Montez Sweat transitioned to power rush as well as I expected him to do, and a lot of that may be the speed of the game, the size of the left tackle. A left tackle that's setting quicker now. All of a sudden you're thinking, I was going to speed rush, and this dude is in my spot at 5 yards. How quickly can you correlate that in your mind to transition that into a power rush? Because he didn't have enough bull or powerful rushes to scare anybody into really setting a firm edge. And so that's a tough position. It takes some time at that position.
It takes a lot of time to learn how to be a rusher too. It almost like, and I had people here tell me that he's still thinking when he's rushing.
There's no doubt about that. And I really do think one of the biggest parts of that is the tackles in this league set with depth quicker than tackles in college football, and they pass set so much more now.
Well, he also was going up against Jason Peters too in that first game.
Yeah, that's a massive challenge, and those are two very good tackles.
And they'll have one this week.
And they're going to have one this week. And they're going to have one almost every single. I mean, you're going to play guys with good tackles, and if you play teams that don't have good tackles, then you're going to get chipped by the backs, and you're going to banged by the tight ends, and you have to have a plan, and you have to have an idea of how you're going to rush the passer. I would have expected some more interior rush from the guys. I know that the Eagles are good up front. I know that Kelsey's a very good player, and they subbed in Vaitai in the second half, and he did a good job. Maybe Duran once or twice had some pressures. Maybe Matt Ioannidis had one bull rush.
I think he had one that I remember.
You had no backers free. And I thought that the Eagles' backs did a pretty good job of picking up some of the blitzes and looks. Yeah. But that's another thing when you start thinking about third and long is you always think if I was a defensive play caller, the first stop I would make is the offensive coordinator's office and say, okay, they're going 3-by-1, 2-by whatever, then they're going to set their back on this side. What are the problems in your mind that the back's got to go through and the quarterback's got to go through in terms of checking Mike? If I can get you to check him as a Mike linebacker, where can I rush away from that? And I think those are some things that you have to learn from, because a lot of times offensive or defensive players and coaches focus so solely on what they're trying to do versus what the offense is trying to do to them, or what creates problems for the offense. So that's something that they really need to think about is what is going to create problems to get free rushers.
You know, it's funny because when I did this story a couple weeks ago talking to Kyle, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur about various offenses and defensive coordinators that gave him problems, one of the things that Kyle talked about with Vic Fangio is how he attacks your personnel and how he's going to game plan do his stuff, but he's really going to do it tailored to what you do more than anybody else. And he's like, those are the kind of guys that you want to pick their brain, because then you can get a deeper insight as to maybe how to then attack them. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that I would wonder. Exactly,
and how people will attack you as well.
Right.
You know, if I'm looking at our defense right now, and John comes back, let's say John does come back in the game, I'm going to be in 11 personnel 80% of the time, and I'm going to run zone run plays, because I think that those guys are penetrating type of players, but they're also not massively big guys. And so if I could just get them moving laterally, all it takes is for one to play behind a gap or out of a gap, or a linebacker to misread things, and that's where the Eagles really gashed the Redskins.
They had those couple big runs on that one drive.
They gashed them in gun run situations, and so I'm looking at what my weaknesses are as much as what some of my strengths are, and they're going to have to focus on that. Now, let's just say John doesn't come back.
Right.
Then I don't know if there was enough, and we expected so much as Redskins fans from the rest of the depth of that group.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the strength.
And so I think you're looking at a Dallas team that'll have obviously a 2-tight package or 12 package and have some downhill runs at Brantley or Settle or the double teams on those players, and they'll have a semblance of a zone run package out of 11 personnel or some gun run stuff. It would be hard not to go gun run and run some zone stuff based on the looks that Philly provided.
After this break, Chris and I go over the Redskins offense, the run game, the pass game, and Kevin O'Connell's influence. So let's switch to the other side of the ball, offense and the run game. And I don't want to get into the whole Adrian was inactive in the first week thing. I want to, again, look forward with this because now clearly it looks like he's going to be carrying the ball for a couple weeks. What do you expect from him?
The thing I like about Adrian Peterson is he gets downhill right now, and he's able to make a guy miss, and he's a one-cut player. Mm-hmm. He's a tough runner who can have success in different schemes. There were times throughout last year that I think he missed a lot of cuts, and I think that whenever you're running multiple schemes in the run game, and which is what the Redskins do.
They do a lot.
They don't run zone, inside-outside zone, or they don't run a power run game. Right. They run everything. Right. And so it's not uncommon for your back to miss some cuts in those situations. But Adrian gives you the benefit of getting, 2, 3, 4, or making one guy miss and getting the bigger play.
Do you think?
But I don't think Darius. I don't want to take anything away from Darius either in that game. And a lot was made of his 18 yards on 10 carries, and one was a draw that was a loss of 5, where Fletcher Cox just destroyed the backfield. Let's say you got 10 on that play instead of -5. It's a little bit different.
There were also a couple of runs, I think, where there was a pulling guard who gets bumped into the hole. There are guys who are losing the blocks. There's a run down in the red zone where I can't remember if it was Moses or one of those guys. If you make your block in space, it was Sprinkle. I was going to ask you about it too. There's a corner in space, and in Sprinkle's there, I couldn't tell where Darius was supposed to cut, but the block wasn't made for whatever reason, and I don't know.
Right. I didn't think Darius really missed anything. Okay. I didn't think Darius. I mean, obviously, you can see when a guy makes something incredible happen, and we all know that he didn't make anything incredible happen, but I didn't think that there was a bunch of misses in the run game. I actually thought Darius did a really nice job in the pass game.
He was excellent
in terms of picking up protection and checking out quickly and making himself available as an eligible.
I think on the McLaurin touchdown, I think he had a blitz pickup.
Huge blitz pickup on play action.
And the technique, the form was great. I mean, it was everything that you watch him out here doing on those machines, So I agree with that. But with the run game, and you brought up the defense being more, maybe simplifying a little bit. If they're doing all this stuff, are there some things that maybe they should say, we don't do this as well? Let's start to simplify a little bit of the run game and not try to be so many things.
I don't think they'll do that.
I don't think they
will. That's my answer. That's the long and short of it. I don't think that they'll do that. But at the same time, you never know game plan wise. I think they had a game plan for Philly that they loved last week, and it was awesome. They executed it per script. They got Philly to change coverage late in the second quarter. Philly was going to all what any coach or whatever would call it as 2-cut coverage. And they were going to have more big looks like the one they got to Terry in the second half of that game. They just couldn't get to him. And they had some penalties that killed them. And I think Case missed a couple things late. There was a 3rd down and long that he could have thrown Vernon wide open on the sideline that would have converted. Yes, yeah. But you say those things, and this is again looking back, and you say, those are the things that change games. And the Case was really, really good. Right. But Carson Wentz converts on a 3rd and 15 in a critical spot in the game out of the pocket and finding Ertz down the field instead of throwing it underneath. Right. That was the play we needed that would have equaled that same type of play. You need those types of plays, especially when you get in backed up situations. And that play is the play that gets you back into rhythm. With that offense, because one thing, and I don't know, Jay, people around the league that you talk to give Jay a lot of credit for how he designs the passing game. What have you seen Kevin have an influence on that at all? And the other thing I want to ask you, well, first of all, let me just... I'll answer that now. The run game looked like the pass game. Your play actions were off of your key run type of plays.
Which is different.
And they did a really good job formationally creating confusion for the Eagles. They went with some tight sets, some bump sets, and some motion sets. and the Eagles really had no clue what was coming next. And so I thought there was a really, really nice rhythm offensively, and I thought it was an offense that had looks that you couldn't say this is a formation they're going to run this out of.
Right.
It looked the same. It all looked the same. It all tied together. It was planned. And it's funny because we talked about this defense was the defense you thought was going to be the planned out, structured defense that's going to be the strong point. And this offense has been kind of a mismatch of things that you want to do put together throughout games. And it was the opposite of that.
It was complete. And it's funny because I was on the Redskins Showtime last week and I was watching myself last night just to kind of study my own tape.
But you do that. I can't.
I hate watching myself. I'll be honest.
It's the worst.
It is painful to watch. But the one I just like, well, what did I say and how did it play out? And like my thing was, it's too early for this game because the offense is just not at a place where they can execute against this kind of defense. And like that was the whole first half, just blew whatever my theory was out of the water for that reason. But the other thing is too that I really enjoy watching this pass game, the way that they open things up over the middle, the way they get the linebackers too wide in the middle, and they get divert eyes where the linebackers are the safeties and create those openings for big plays. And that's one thing I don't know, and that seems to be Jay's offense, but that's what I also wondered about with Kevin's influence as well, if you see it in that area at all.
I saw it especially in first and second down situations. Mm-hmm. And I think even though they haven't always been a good conversion third down offense, I think Jay's a pretty good designer in terms of
he gets a lot of credit for that.
A lot of the third down stuff and creating tough looks for defenses and high-low reads where you put guys in binds. I think Jay's done a pretty good job with that. Third down situations. The problem I had last year, let's call it a problem. The concern I had was the balance and the rhythm and the style in which the offense operated was, I thought, a little bit too. I'm trying to think of the proper word here for this without saying. I think they were guessing too much offensively last year as to what they wanted to do and when and what defenses were they were going to get. And I think this year, at least in the first week, they really had a good plan that tied together.
So do you look at them differently going forward than after watching them Sunday?
If they stay healthy, I think absolutely. With the addition of guys like Terry McLaurin, I think Harmon added some things. And if you get Jordan back, that's another game plan problem for guys. But really, Terry's going to change the offense more than anybody else as of right now. But no one had film on Terry.
That's the thing.
No one knew that Terry was going to step on their toes the way he stepped on their toes and get over the top the way he did that. It was just a rookie receiver wearing number 17 out there. So Dallas is going to say, okay, this kid can fly.
Yeah, that's a big thing going forward too. Is now because they clearly seem to hide him this summer for a reason. The preseason games because and even I think who was talking about Chris Thompson was like, I've never seen a rookie treated the way Terry was, where I know the one game he had.
He's your one receiver.
I know.
They knew that.
And I think they knew that they didn't want to show that off right away because he clearly can do that. And as an Ohio State guy, I didn't even see his speed until last year watching the games, and then I was shocked when he ran at the combine because you didn't know that he was that fast watching those games. Now you see it, and I also think he's a better route runner than when he was in college last year, and he seems to be able to,
and they didn't run, and I don't want this to sound in any way a slight to Ohio State or Dwayne, but they didn't run a lot at Ohio State. They really didn't. They were very simple. They had a simple package, a lot of crossing routes, a lot of short and underneath type of routes, and they didn't have as many diverse, you got to cross the safety or corner's face to get over the top downfield type of stuff, unless it was, a play action here and there. And they also have 5 guys at Ohio State.
They had a lot of guys
that can all play their butt off. And so he kind of got... And he didn't play. Terry played 50% of snaps at Ohio State.
Yeah, because they had a lot of talent to skill position.
He kind of went unknown, but just kind of guy Terry is, the kind of worker he is, the teammate, the leader. I really am really impressed by Terry.
He was. When they drafted him, I thought it was a great move because I knew all about that part. I think the instant impact, I wasn't sure that he would make it like that. Clearly, listen, he went over 100 yards. Doxson never did that. But I was not expecting that kind of a game, but you knew what he could do and what they felt he could do. I just didn't know we'd see it right away. I didn't know if they'd have time to throw those passes some of the time, too.
Yeah, and you got to give offensive line some credit last week as well. Yeah. And guys like Donald Penn and,
Wasn't always pretty. And it's funny.
Wasn't always pretty.
But listen, there's times I'm watching Flowers, and I tweeted this out the other day, where the hands, his contact is up around above the shoulder pads. and his hand's up here, but he recovered on that play.
He's a pretty athletic dude.
He is, when he wants to move his feet. And then there's other times where I see him like, why aren't you moving your feet? Like sometimes he gets caught running after the guy versus moving his, you know what I'm saying?
I do know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but when you see him do it right, it's like, well, now I know why. Now you know why they think they're trying to make it work with him at that position.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. And I think they have some opportunities there. They got to be better though with penalties.
Yes.
You know, they do. There were a couple. I'm moving back again.
No,
they have to be better with penalties. Okay. I thought, you know, they're going to say that some of the holds aren't holds. They're not. I'll tell you the one they're going to get one play back. The Donald Penn, the first hold Donald Penn had, it wasn't a hold.
Oh yeah.
That's the one the NFL is going to turn over. The D-end rushing kind of fell down, and then Donald pumped him and drove him to the ground. That one was not a hold. You're not going to get the first Morgan Moses hold back in a run. He had his hands up and outside. You're not going to get the second Morgan Moses penalty out on the toss sweep. It looked like he tackled him. I can freeze frame it, and you can see Morgan's arm around the DB's leg, and you're not getting the high-low block back. And the high-low block was insane. That's a toss away. And Flowers in no way, we were just talking about him, that's what sparked. And he knows this. In no way should he have hung on the defensive end. He should have just took off running upfield on an angle to go block the linebacker, and Donald's cutting the defensive end. And it doesn't matter. It's toss away. The defensive
and he got a first down, and then instead of first and 10, second and 16. That was a ball breaker play. I mean,
and then it was the play that preceded, or two plays before the one I mentioned earlier, where Case probably had a shot to Vernon on the sideline to change that drive and get back into rhythm.
And like you said, every time Philly had that, they did that. Last thing I want to focus on Dallas's offense, and I don't know how much you've been able to watch of Dallas so far and what Dak did against the Giants. Did you see a different guy? Because you have a new offense coordinator with Kellen Moore, and then you Dak in his, his fourth year now, whatever. Did you see anything different out of him?
I saw a guy that had control of the pocket, was poised, made some unbelievable throws. And maybe it is, it's so wild to watch the evolution of quarterbacks, because maybe that offense was so simplistic over years one and year two, because they didn't feel that Dak was ready to make some of those bigger plays and to read defenses and timing out better than they had.
Time.
Maybe that was a sense that they'd had, and that's why it was. The offense was so basic in Dallas in its first 2 years, and they got big plays and they got things going because of the run game and what Dak did. But there were so many times that they had 3rd and 5 that they converted quick post to Cole Beasley or some easy 3rd and 5 play where you're like, this is install 101 stuff, and you're getting this against people, and they know it's coming. But Dak made some huge plays. The other thing I was thinking about as I was watching that game is that game plan started to go together before they believed Ezekiel Elliott was going to play in that game.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking maybe a part of this game plan is to push the ball hard down the field against the Giants secondary, who's a little bit weaker, and not to implement a heavy run load in the game plan, because you don't know if you have your one back. And so you didn't know exactly when. Maybe they had a better field than anybody else, but that game plan started to go together 3 weeks ago.
Absolutely. And the other thing for these guys is now you got Elliott gets the rust off, so to speak, and now you got to, then you show that pass game, and now coming in here, he's going to feel 1 week further along in his process, and this passing game is going to feel off the charts because of what it showed the other day.
Yeah, the scariest thing is if Dak can drop back and throw the ball in 1st and 10 situations or 2nd and 4 situations where they create real diversity. You don't say run or play action.
Right.
You say we got to worry about some drop back stuff. It's a problem. He's a talented kid. He's a leader. He's a good player. I was not as high on him as at first as I think I've become, but he's grown and he's
I've always liked his poise.
You know what? I liked his whole deal through college. I can't remember exactly what his 2 degrees were, but it was like sports management and leadership was his. It's like he had a master's in like some leadership. It was like he went to college to be a pro quarterback. I've always thought what he did in college. If I had a son that was going to play quarterback, you're like, look at this. You know you're a quarterback. You want to be a quarterback. Learn how to be a leader. Learn how to be.
But I always liked the way he was in the pocket. Even his rookie year against these guys, I felt like he showed a lot of poise, and it's like you can build off some of that stuff, and as the rest of his game develops, because you either have that or you don't. It seems. So, but we'll see. So we'll see what happens. Chris, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Joe.
After this break, I'll be back with Redskins tight end Vernon Davis talking about the emotions of playing after learning about his grandfather's death. Welcome back. Now, here's my interview with Vernon Davis. How hard was it to play in that opener?
It was extremely tough. I didn't think I was going to play, to tell you the truth. I think I got about 3 hours of sleep that night, and then when I got out there, I felt really weak. I didn't feel like I had my strength. But it was something about that very first play that we had. I was just so eager to get in the end zone. So when I caught the ball, I just turned upfield, and all I could do was react.
Well, and that's why I say it's like sometimes you get carried by something else.
Yeah, I felt like it was, at that moment, once I got the ball in my hand, I felt like I was strong. I didn't feel weak. But throughout the game, when I didn't have the ball in my hands, or if I was just sitting down on the bench or something, I just felt like I didn't have a lot of energy. You know what I mean?
Is it hard to, that's such a, football's a game. It's your livelihood, but it's a game.
Right.
That's real life. Is it hard when you're on the bench to not think of it? Are you able to focus just on the game?
Yeah. You're allowed to you're allowed to focus. I definitely focus, but I could feel that the pain and the trauma that I had to go through from seeing his body, walking into the house and seeing his body and stuff.
When did that happen? Was that Friday night?
So Friday, I got the call from my grandmother. She called me crying, and I grew up in Northwest DC. They still live in the same house that I grew up in. As I was on my way to get on to meet them at the airport. At the facility to go to the airport. She called me, so I turned around, went to the house. He was there. His body was there for about 2 hours because they had to do their due diligence, investigate, make sure everything was natural cause. And I had the opportunity to spend time with him.
I remember, like I told you, when we talked about your acting and all that, sometimes you think about growing up and all that, and what they meant to you and how you would incorporate that. I know there's probably a lot to process, but some of your favorite memories, what kind of person was he and how did he shape you?
He's a great person. He's the best father, grandfather, motivation, inspiration, whatever you want to call it. He was all of that because he showed me pretty much what I had to do to be a good person, be a good man. You know what I mean? How to be someone that takes care of the house. He was a blue-collar guy. He was a maintenance man. He worked in apartment buildings, changing light bulbs, fixing everything. He's really hands-on. So I learned. I used to go at night. He used to go do his runs on the apartment. Yeah. So I used to go with him, and that's where I learned a lot about changing different things, filters and all kinds of stuff.
Homeowner stuff too.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. And I also learned that he taught me to I have a habit of just before the night is over, if I'm downstairs or upstairs, before the night is over, I go out through the house and check everything. I go downstairs and make sure all the doors are locked. And, just a lot of those things that you're supposed to have, those qualities that you're supposed to have as a man when it comes to the house. I learned that from him.
And that's how much, I know it's very soon still, but how much you take comfort in all of that? Or is it too soon to even go to that point yet?
Yeah, it's also, everything's so, I don't know, it's just so, it just happened, so I'm still processing everything.
It's funny too because people don't always realize. You guys are real people. You have real things going on, and so you never know what somebody on the field is going through. Nobody knew this was going on, and after your play, I think people thought you got hurt. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? But people, you guys have things to deal with just like anybody else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Emotions and everything. We're just human beings. We're just regular people.
So one other thing too, we're talking about going back to the hurdling of the play and making a rough transition with the football, but you talked about too because you take care of yourself. How much is that going to? Somebody was asking me yesterday on the radio, how is this guy able to do this? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I know, I've seen you, I know how you work and all that, but what is it that you do that you feel helps you still be able to make a move like that and still have the speed you do?
Just being consistent. Yeah, I've never had any severe injuries. I've never suffered from anything other than a concussion. I get 3 massages a week. I've been doing that for the last 14 years. I see my chiropractor weekly. Proper nutrition, and making sure I'm in a good place mentally. I've been super consistent with that throughout my entire career. And one thing, like I tell the younger guys, everything that you do during the season, make sure you do it during the off season.
Right.
Like if you're getting those massages, do them during the off season. Don't stop. Never stop. And the way you worked to get to this point, continue to work that way. And that's what I've been doing. I still get on the track during the off season. I lift the same way I used to lift when I was in high school and college. So I just never changed anything.
It's funny because I'm going to go back to your grandfather, that, and my guess is that some of that you may have gotten to there. It sounds like he was someone who was just very consistent with his approach and the way he did things.
He was. He's very consistent with his approach. I mean, from the time I was one all the way up until I can remember 18, 19, he was still walking around the house checking those doors and make sure taking the garbage out and just being a man of the house. You know, he's super consistent. Hard work, like I said, blue collar, never asked for anything, did everything, worked himself and just provided for himself, never asked for a handout or anything. So all those qualities I pretty much learned from him.
After this break, I'll be back to answer your questions about the Redskins. Okay, now it's just you and I with some podcast mailbag questions. Let's get right to it. Adam Aniba at the BNG Report wants to know any word if he says CT, but it's Chris Thompson will have a bigger role in the offense this week. Seems like Jay is always too cautious with CT. All right, Adam, here we go. Thompson played 36 out of the 58 snaps last week. That's a pretty good chunk for Chris Thompson. He was targeted 10 times in the passing game, caught 7 passes, ran 3 times, so 10 touches overall. In their ideal world, they'd like to get him between 12 and 15 touches per game. So yeah, you could see him maybe being used a little bit more in this game or get a few more touches. But to be honest, every time Thompson plays, I hear both sides. Every time he's used more than 10 times, some people freak out. How can you use him that much? And I don't think it's about being cautious here. Well, maybe it is, but it's also about being smart. Thompson's a small guy who plays hard, plays physical, doesn't shy away from contact, and keep in mind how often he's in pass pro too. All that takes a pounding. It adds up. So it takes a toll. If he touched it more than 15 times per game, I think his effectiveness would start to diminish. And plus, there's no way, I don't think he'd last the season. Now, he doesn't last the season anyways, or he hasn't the last couple years, but I think you give him a better chance in that 12 to 15 range. So I think that's the ideal number. And if he's not hitting that, then I think there's something wrong because he can be a playmaker for them. Okay, next question, and it's from Blacksmith Skins fan. He says, do you personally think Kevin O'Connell is as good as advertised? Well, we've only seen one game with him as the offensive coordinator and still Jay Gruden calling the plays. I do think O'Connell's a sharp guy, and I do think he has had an influence on this passing game on the offense in general. I don't know that he's a Sean McVay part 2, but I do see him as another head coach. And I say that because with McVay, it was obvious early on that he's going to be a young head coach. I could see O'Connell maybe taking a couple more years, but I do think that he's going to get that chance. He's smart. He's inquisitive. He's been around a lot of other smart people, including Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, guys like that. But let's see what he does for an entire season in this role. I do think he's off to a good start. I do think he has a good reputation around the league. So that's good for them. So, who knows what's going to happen here in the future, but he will be a name to watch moving forward here and in the NFL. All right, number 3, Antoine Knapp. He wants to know, what is the relationship between Jay and the locker room? Has he lost it? Odds of him finishing the season as the head coach. All right, Antoine, before last week, I would say the relationship was very good. I do know there are some players who aren't happy. I know of one in particular. I hear from his agent quite a bit. However, I feel the locker room largely likes Gruden and wants to play for him. Now, last week was interesting because of the AP stuff, obviously. I did ask one player who loves Peterson if guys were angry, because that's the way it was coming across, or at least some of the post-game comments, what Morgan Moses said. And this player said, no, they're not angry. They were just really surprised at what happened. I know what Morgan Moses said, and I understand exactly where Moses is coming from. And, part of me says, hey, you just got to go play better. Let those guys make the decisions. But the other part of me says it speaks to the respect that they have for Peterson. And as a guy who blocked from all year, saw what he did for that team, I get where he's coming from. I don't take it, though, that Gruden lost the room. However, where I definitely think Gruden hurts himself is with comments like the 55 carries out of I formation. I think there's a lack of transparency that also hurts here. I'd say that needs to improve, but I don't think it's going to change. And by transparency, I mean sometimes like with guys maybe not knowing exactly what the role is or what's going to happen or whatever. In a situation like this, I think he would have helped himself if he had gone to the team, if he had gone to the team and just said, hey, listen, we're making decisions for what I feel is best for this team. And I think guys can always say, well, I disagree with it, but at least I know where he's coming from. I think it helps when players know where a guy is coming from. And I think that's where Gruden hurts himself sometimes with some guys. But again, I do think it seems like that he's had the locker room. So I would expect him to finish the season, but I really have no way of knowing that one way or another. But I know after they fired Norv Turner late in the season, I think Dan Snyder realized that was the wrong timing. But every situation is different, so I really don't know. Keith Vieira Jr. wants to know, John, do you believe that if Peterson excels in his next few starts, that he has a chance to take the job for the season from Geis? I don't know about that. I think we have to wait and see what happens. I would think, if nothing else, to me, it demands that he stays active, that Gruden finds a way to help special teams with someone other than a fourth running back, or you keep 4 running backs active. If AP goes out and does well and the team wins a couple of games, I don't know how you turn away from Peterson. I really don't. I know they love what they think Geis can do, but he hasn't done it, and he's been hurt in 2 of the 3 games he's played in Washington. It's not as if the players don't like Geis, but they love and respect Peterson for what he's done and what they feel he can still do. I'll call it a hunch that Peterson remains upset with Gruden. That's okay as long as he takes it to the field and conducts himself in a professional manner. And that's what has happened. From the time this has happened to now, Peterson has been nothing but professional. I think that's where other players will take their cue as well. I would be upset with Gruden too, as much for how it was handled as well as for his post-game comments. But I don't think that that's going to rub off. I think Peterson will conduct himself well. But again, I know that wasn't your question. I think it has to, like I said, if nothing else, keep him active, and that should be a no-brainer. Strict9 wants to know, a couple Skins media guys have implied that it's Minuski whose seat is the hottest. Do I agree? If he gets let go in season, who's likely to take over, Rob or Ray? And that would be Rob Ryan or Ray Horton. Yes, I would agree that Minuski has the hottest seat for no other reason than he was the one they tried to replace in the offseason. I doubt he's let go during the season, though, and it's hard for me to speculate as to who would take over. I don't know. And again, I don't have a definitive answer on that, on either part of he would let go. If it was me, I'd pick Ray Horton. I don't see Rob Ryan having had a lot of success as a coordinator in the past. I do know one guy who played for him who liked him better as a coordinator than as a position coach. So I don't know. I also wonder if Minuski was fired, what would happen to Jim's Tom Sula? Not that Washington would want him gone by any means. Tom Sula is a terrific coach, but a big reason he returned was because of Minuski. All right, let's go on to Ivan Lambert. This will be the last question. And he wants to know which 2019 draft pick looks the best, which looks most disappointing, and the same for 2018. Ivan, the most disappointing, well, it's too early to say that because I had one guy ask me if Montez Sweat was a bust. He played 1 game. He's a pass rusher, and Cooley and I talked about him earlier. It takes time. So I'm just going to stick for right now in this group as to who looks best because this is a really good class. It's only 1 game, again, but I think we all saw what happened Sunday. The 2 who stood out were obviously Cole Holcomb and Terry McLaurin. And I think those 2 will probably separate themselves more than the other rookies for at least a little bit. I love their approach. I think they're both very professional, studious, and guys who will develop into team leaders eventually. I have liked Cole Holcomb from the minute we started seeing him in camp, and I watched him, I'm thinking, why did this guy fall to where he did? But he did, and I think they're going to benefit, and I think we saw Sunday a glimpse of what he's going to do. I think he's going to be a good one, and I really, really love McLaurin, not just because he's from Ohio State. It's because I got to know him from following him at Ohio State and know what he's about. That's why I like him. So I think he's going to be good, and I like the way he's improved as a receiver even from over the last year. So I really like the potential of this class. I think they found guys to help now while waiting for the 15th overall pick at Dwayne Haskins to develop. And it's funny because one of the reasons that some people there did not want a quarterback at 15 was because they wanted a guy now who could make an impact. They found some just in later rounds. They found several of them. And that doesn't always happen. And I think you can look at last year's class as an example. And as for last year, the disappointing part to me, I don't know if there's one guy in particular, is more so it's that the players picked in rounds 2, 3, and 4 have done little to help them, and that's Darius Geist, Jaron Christian, and Troy Apke. Geist's injuries, have been disappointing. Christian and Apke were just drafted too high. At least Apke can help on special teams because of his speed, and he'll be a backup. I don't know that he's going to be a good backup, but I know he can play special teams, and you saw some of that speed. To me, I saw it when I watched the game again, how it impacted there. I have some severe doubts on Christian. The best rookie from that group, Deron Payne has been pretty good, and I think he'll continue to be very good. So I like him, and I'm going to be really curious to see what Trey Quinn does all season, because Quinn can be an all-around receiver. Go back and watch the game last week and watch some of his blocks. The catches you were going to all see, but watch his blocking. It's pretty good. So there you go. That's the podcast mailbag, and that's all you get from me this week. Thank you very much to Chris Cooley for joining me and giving me his time. It was very generous. Thank you to Vernon Davis. I know it was not an easy topic for him to talk about. And as always, thank you for your questions, and thank you for listening.